Hi, Lisa. I am so excited to have you on our podcast today, talking about hoof trimming and hoof, big word.
Angular limb deformities.
There we go, angular limb deformities and managing their postural health with how regularly and how well we trim them. So would you like to start off by just talking a little bit about yourself and how you got started with hoof care?
Yeah, sure. So I run the Glorious Hoof in Western Sydney. It's a barefoot trimming / polyurethane shoeing business. So I first got into hoof care when I was 12 years old. My mother bought me a pony, and he was very naughty for the farrier. But he was really well behaved for me when I was picking his feet out. And she thought to herself, you could do that. So then she bought me a rasp. And luckily, I rode that pony a lot on all different types of terrain, and he had very straight legs. So we didn't have any issues with a 12-year-old just randomly rasping whenever she thought they looked a bit long. And that kind of, I'd always looked after my own horse's feet. And then when I started to grow up a little bit, working on some friends' horses. And then as a young adult in 2007, when equine influenza hit, of course, farriers couldn't come to properties, and I was pulling shoes and trimming for more friends. And then I eventually went on to do the diploma of equine podiatry with the college down in Yark there, and started my business then. And then, ended up getting really interested in glue-on shoes and nail-on polyurethane shoes. And so that's what I specialize in today.
Yeah, awesome. So what's the difference between the glue-on and polyurethane shoes and the...
So polyurethane shoes, polyurethane's just the plastic that it's made out of. And a lot of the shoes that I use, they could be nailed or glued on. There's some that just get nailed. There's some that just get glued. Basically, a nail-on polyurethane shoe's got a metal nailing plate in it. There are some that you can nail that don't have the nailing plate, but I find that they just stay on better if they have a nailing plate. And then the ones that don't are the glue-on ones. They tend to be a bit lighter because the weight of the glue adds, weight to the limb, which changes the biomechanics of the movement and all the rest of it. So, so I don't use like plain metal shoes. I'm just not interested in working with metal. I really like the polyurethane. What we do with polyurethane shoes really excites me. So that's what I specialize in. There's heaps of metal shod farriers that do very well.
Yeah.
But good hoof care is good hoof care, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. So when we have had a look through your Facebook group, your Facebook page, the Glorious Hoof.
Yep.
There's some really fun photos on there about correcting posture for our horses.
Yeah.
And how you trim them up properly.
Yeah.
And I had a big takeaway from this when we did the summit last year about how conformational problems will wear the hoof incorrectly. So then it's hard for the farriers to correct the postural alignment if we're not trimming regularly enough.
Yes. It's kind of like a cyclical arrangement. If there's, a horse that doesn't have a straight leg is going to wear their hoof not straight. So, for instance, a pigeon-toed horse where their toes turn inwards, they're going to break over their foot, not at the front of the foot. They're going to break over it slightly to the side, which is the lateral side, outside. And then they'll wear where they're breaking. They wear the foot out of their way, which makes the inside of the foot not wear, and it looks like when you pick up the foot, it grows faster. It might be growing faster depending on the situation, but what's happening is it's not wearing. So then if the inside toe is longer and the outside toe is shorter, it's going to just make that hoof turn in even more.
Yeah.
And so a hoof grows, there's a few studies. I think it's 4 mils to 7 mils a month, roughly. A hoof will grow that quickly. Mm-hmm. So in 4 weeks, you're going to have potentially, or in 5 or 6 weeks, you're going to potentially have an extra centimetre of hoof, causing even more leverage in different directions depending on what's going on in the foot. Even in a nice straight foot, you're going to have extra leverage where we're not necessarily wanting it to be. So if you can imagine a hoof that's not straight, having an extra centimetre of growth somewhere, and then maybe even a centimetre less growth in another area, how much that's going to then put extra pressure on an extra leverage on the sensitive structures inside.
Yeah, 100%. I don't know why it took listening to you for me to figure that one out.
I get it.
There's also something I think you were talking about, maybe that Sarah picked out, with looking at the rings of the hoof to be able to tell like if it's growing out straight.
Yeah, so not necessarily the rings, but the way a hoof is, like the hoof capsule grows with tubules, right? If you look up really close on your horse's foot, especially after a fresh trim or when the hoof's nice and clean, you'll see the tubules, the lines, right? And in a hoof that's nice and straight, your tubules will be in line with the limb. They'll be nice and they'll be perpendicular to the ground, so at right angle to the ground. In a, say, again, pigeon-toed horse, those tubules are going to be pointing to the inside. And a horse that toes out, those tubules are going to be pointing to the outside.
Yeah.
That's something that can be like it goes hand in hand with because those tubules grow whichever way the bone is facing.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously that's why when you're doing barefoot trimming, you're supposed to stick to the 4-week mark rather than the 6 to 8 week mark.
Definitely. So, I guess my hoof care paradigm is all based around what am I trying to say here? Like a species appropriate care, right? Everything to do with horses should be species appropriate. So we've got to think back about the way horses evolve, the way their DNA has told them to exist in their environment. So being able to, basically what I'm doing with a hoof rasp when I'm trimming a horse is I'm simulating the wear that they would have gotten in that period of time, right? So we want to keep our hoof capsules as tight around the bone inside as possible without over-thinning the wall, over-thinning the sole, over-thinning any of that. They still need the protection, but we need to keep the leverage as tight and neat and possible around that hoof capsule, because every step that a horse makes is meant to wear a little bit of foot. And then, of course, we domesticate these animals. We take them out of their environment where they're meant to be doing, I think it's around about 11, or I've got a podcast on this, how much wear a horse should have on their foot. But I think Brian Hampson, he's an Australian researcher, he's a farrier as well, and he did GPS studies, and ideally around about 11 to 12 kilometers a day is how much your horse should be moving over varied terrain. And I can tell you a lot of horses, it's a lot. It is a lot. It's not too much, no. But it's a lot. But it's a lot more than what we can provide for them in any yarded situation.
Paddock.
In a paddock, exactly. A small little 2-acre paddock. You think, oh wow, what a big yard. It's really not. So thinking about how we can try and keep our horses in as yes, in a natural way as possible, but it's not natural. Taking a horse out of domesticating a horse is not natural, but trying to think about the way that we can do that. I'm waffling a little bit here, but part of that is the simulated wear needs to be done as ideally. I trim my own horses every 2 weeks.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I don't have to pay someone to do it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take very long, and their feet barely look like they've had anything done to them. But then they live in that all of the time. Mm-hmm. So thinking about, I think 4 weeks with that 4 to 7 millimeters worth of growth, removing that regularly is really important.
Yeah, 100%. So have you seen, obviously, horses that have just been left to go that length of time and having, significant structural changes in their body that can't be rectified, and then potential ongoing lameness?
Yes. So I deal with obviously a lot of different horses, but there's one particular horse that I have in mind. When I first met him, He's a little quarter horse, and he has feet that basically point at each other. The left front is much worse than the right front. And he's, the way that he, when I first met him, like his feet were very long. The owner is a wonderful owner. She sticks to the program. She does everything that, like, she gets him done every 4 weeks on the dot. So she's wonderful, but she was having trouble getting a farrier who would come and trim her horse regularly and take enough off and, you know, work with the way the horse's conformation, because he's an adult horse, right? So there's no changing. You can't make them go straight because the bones are actually have fused, and he's pigeon-toed for life. But what we've got to do is make sure that he doesn't get too imbalanced with that wear, the uneven wear, to be able to reduce stress on his soft tissues, especially his collateral ligaments. So each joint has got ligaments on either side, or wrapping all around, really, but we call them collateral ligaments. And when you've got a horse with a hoof deformity, especially, or an angular limb deformity, putting pressure on those is your immediate problem. And then also the way the horse uses the limb in static balance, so when they're standing still, and dynamic balance when they're moving, can also put pressure on their posture, the way they stand, the way, especially say if front end issues, like they get a lot of issues in the thoracic sling, so you know, the chest area. And this particular horse I'm thinking of, he will, even to this day, he was worse when I first met him, and obviously he's a lot better now. And he has regular body work as well to keep him going. And he's a hardworking ridden horse. He will stand with his front feet closer together and them pointing at each other, pretty much, until his chest gets fatigued, and then he will open his legs up and stand wide, like base. He'll be base. He'll look like his base narrow. His chest will get fatigued. He'll stand base wide. And then his fetlocks will get fatigued. His collateral ligaments on his fetlock will get fatigued, but his chest is resting. Then he'll move his feet back in, be base narrow again. And it's a cycle. If you watch him, he just puts his legs out and puts his legs in. And it's very clever that he does that. He's trying to keep the pressure. He's trying not to over fatigue different structures in his body. So the way that I trim this guy is, for static balance, I try and keep him as gathered as possible. So when I'm, say, for instance, I'm doing his left front foot, when I pick it up, he's very worn on the outside and he's very long on the inside. I'll trim off the inside, but then I'll also make sure he's not got too much on the outside. So, okay, static balance, I'll trim off the inside, right? And keep that nice and tight so that it's not overstressing his outside ligaments all up his leg.
Yeah.
For dynamic balance, when he's moving, he needs to break over in this area and be easily able to break over on the outside of that hoof, right? So it's his left front, this one. He needs to easily break over there. So that needs to be trimmed out of his way as well. If I leave that long, that's going to make it harder for him to break over, and it's going to make all those ligaments that need to break over in that area stretch and have repetitive strain injuries, right? So I also need to trim that in. So there's two different considerations here for this horse. So I know I've done a good job. When I finish, I'll do one foot, and I always start on his worst foot, because then I watch as I go around the rest of the body to see where he places that limb. And if he's as close to, base neutral, I guess, not base narrow, base wide. If he's standing as close to base neutral as possible and he seems comfortable there and able to maintain that, I'm pretty happy with his trim that time. But I'll often go back and fix it. The other thing I do with him is I'll take slow motion video. A horse's hoof should land as close to, like, if you're looking at them from straight on and they're walking straight towards you. And most phones have got slow motion video these days, so it's quite easy if you've got a helper to be able to take a video of this on your own horses. A horse should land with both sides of its feet, the inside and the outside on the bottom, so medial and lateral, as close to equal as possible. Sometimes I'll land slightly outside first and then drop to the inside, but they shouldn't be landing hard on the outside and snapping to the inside. They should be landing hard on the inside and snapping to the outside. Yeah. That's going to cause concussive issues. So I'll take slow motion video of most horses if I'm a bit not sure about the balance. But this horse in particular, I've done this in the past. So where you take the video. Slow motion's better. You can see it without slow motion, but slow motion's better. And you can really see the way that and these pigeon-toed horses, they'll come through, they'll wing, they'll move their legs in such weird ways, depending on the horse. And then they'll quite often, they'll land, even though the inside's long, a lot of the time they'll land hard on the outside. Even though, and then so it's difficult because you think you got to trim out of the way what they land hard on. You think if I trim more on the outside, it's going to turn him in more. So there's a balance.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, I'll stop.
No, continue. This is really good.
I was just going to repeat myself again.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, I love that idea. I was actually just thinking that it would be pretty awesome if we had the opportunity to send you in some slow motion videos of our horses' hooves, and we try to trust our farriers, and I leave it to my farriers' good judgment. Because
and we appreciate that. Definitely.
Hooves aren't my jam, so I trust you, and your years of education and passion, and just like digging into the trenches on the details. So I don't have the passion to dig into the details. So being able to give it eyes over on somebody who has that obsession for it makes it easier to know. And I definitely appreciate, we definitely struggle. Well, some of my students anyway have farriers that are good farriers, but do struggle to get out regularly to maintain the hoof to that level that's required. So it can be hard to manage their soundness under saddle and their musculoskeletal health when they have such significant postural deformities that are being exaggerated by the length of the hoof. And you just end up kind of trying to chase your tail just to keep them going, because you take that length off and all of a sudden all the ligaments contract up again, and it's this constant management cycle of the ligaments and everything hyperextending to compensate for the rotation and then all contracting back up again. And it's any wonder our poor horses end up with soundness issues. It's such a big management process.
And we often think, well, probably not you or I or your audience, but the industry as a whole, I think a lot of these behavioural issues are actually hoof and body issues, not really behavioural issues.
Yeah, definitely. When I go out to look at a dangerous horse, it's most commonly to do with a horse trying to communicate something. And generally what they're communicating is pain. So then when we try and strip back, where is this pain coming from, I quite often can see poor training techniques from the saddle. But then obviously you would see the hoof issues, and the body workers are going to see the musculoskeletal issues, and going to see the ulcers. And it's such, when I have a new student that gets a new horse, we spend a year to 2 years trying to unravel all of these management issues that people just don't even realize are a problem. And so, you correct behavior, you're not really correcting behavior, you're just telling the horse it's not allowed to react and tell you that it's a problem. And so no, you can. So then when you give them the opportunity to tell you there's a problem, we're like, holy, there's 10 years of poor management that has led to these behavioral issues. And now you've got to try and rewind that. It doesn't happen in 6 months.
No, it doesn't. And horses that have been, and it's not necessarily, people don't deliberately shut their horses down. They don't deliberately ignore pain. They don't. It's just that I guess we're not taught from either a young age or from when we, sorry, my dog's in here with me. Come here.
Hi, Bobby.
He's on crate rest, but he's very upset that he's stuck in the crate, so I've brought him upstairs with me. And he's not meant to be moving. Sit. yeah, the industry as a whole, I feel like we're not taught to see these more subtle signs of pain: a slightly wrinkled nose, a little bit of a worried eye, you know, a horse that just, oh, he's a little bit hard to catch, but if you've got food, that's fine. Well, why does he not want to hang out with you? Like we're taught to kind of not see our horses as robots. That's definitely not the case, because nobody really is into horses unless they love them, because they're too expensive and heartbreaking otherwise. But you know, I'll give myself an example. So when I first started trimming, obviously I was concentrating on the foot and concentrating on what I was doing a lot, and trying to have the hoof where it was convenient for me, and lifting the legs up really high, or putting too much torque on the joint or whatever. And then these horses were a little bit naughty. These days, like, I don't do anywhere near as many horses as what other farriers do, because number one, my conformation is terrible. If I was a competition horse, I'd be a low-level dressage horse that's retired at 12. I'm not even joking. No. And number two, I specialize in these guys that that need a little bit more time, holding the leg really low, having sitting back and having a look at where they put their foot, and having a think about, okay, well, he's not got his cannon bones perpendicular to the ground. Why is that? You know, has he got long toes, so he's standing back underneath himself too much and standing what they call goat on a rock? Or why is that? Is it muscular? Is it hoof? Blah, blah, blah. Like, I spend a little bit more time looking at those kind of things. Where was I going with this? Listening. Yeah. So the horses have taught me to listen. And when I get a new horse that's not been listened to, they will yell straight away. Like a horse with like a pony with a locking stifle, for instance, a pony that I've got soon. You run your hand down and then you wait. Wait until they move themselves around so they can pop that open, pop up, unlock their stifle, and then they can pick it up. But if you put the foot down, oh, this pony's not listening to me, pick up, they get so worried. They freak out. So, when I first get to these horses, and we might not even know that there's a locking stifle issue. A lot of the time owners don't notice these things, because they're not taught these things. They're not told these things by the professionals that they employ. Whether that's because the professionals think that they're not going to listen, or which happens a lot, unfortunately, or the professionals aren't aware of it themselves because they haven't been taught. There's a lot I don't know that I don't see or listen. But, these horses, I'll run my hand down their leg and they start freaking out immediately. They're like, oh, no. Or they might, like, they can't kick because they're locked. But, they're very worried. And I'm like, okay, why is this horse worried about me just running my hand down its leg?
100%.
There's a reason.
Most often with behavioral issues with kicking, I'm finding something wrong with
they're yelling
quarters, whether like it can be the stifle, obviously, but then obviously
sacro
kick when the stifle is actually locked.
Exactly.
So there's other problems,
sacro, hammies, like there's so many issues. And by the time they're kicking, they're yelling at you,
because
they're going, don't touch me.
They've had people like do exactly what you say, where they're not picking their leg up and then end up reefing their leg up, which is the part that causes the pain, which is the part that makes them freak out about the situation.
Or there's another thing as well, that I'll give a horse its foot back as many times as it needs it. If it needs a break, it gets its foot back. As long as I ask politely. I teach them not to snatch. Snatching hurts my body, so I teach them not to snatch, but then I'll hold them where it's comfortable. They might be fine picking their foot up, but then after 2 minutes, the other limb is, like the contralateral limb or whatever, will be fatiguing because they don't have strong glutes or quads, or their sacrum is starting to, the ligaments in the sacrum starting to fatigue, or they're bringing abscess in the other front foot, so they're getting a little bit sore, and you don't know because you're not at that foot yet, or so listening. This is kind of going off track a bit, but listening to the horses is really, really important to me. I've got on my wall in my office here, I've got my what are they called? My values, I guess. And one of them is connection with horses. And that's a big part of it for me, is connecting with the horses and really listening to them, because they tell you what's wrong.
100%. That is, ours is first do no harm. And then definitely next one is listening. I'm just going to quickly pause the recording because my dog is going off.
That's all right.
I think there might be someone at the door. One sec.
No worries.
Okay, we're back. Meet a man. Yeah, so definitely if you're seeing those kind of big behavioral issues with the horses, I know that we see it a bit with the farriers. If they're not paying attention to why the horse is kicking, it does make our work with them harder. So I've definitely had, students with horses. One I'm thinking in particular is stifle lock. Was a stifle lock issue, and she couldn't go near her horse's back legs without her trying to like kick at her. And it's because she hasn't been given the grace to unlock the stifle herself, pick it up for herself, which is why also we prefer to cue train the leg lift rather than actually be the one that's physically lifting it up. Plus it doesn't wear on our body.
And can I say, farriers love when the horse will just run. My own horse, I just run my hand down her leg and she picks it up. It's amazing. I wish they all did that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's another thing that I hear from my farrier a lot. Like, it's not the farrier's job to train your horse. It's your job to train the horse and make sure that they can pick their legs up well for the farrier.
Definitely. It definitely helps.
Yeah.
Makes us less grumpy. Like farriers have a reputation for being grumpy.
Yeah.
And like it's because we love our job, but it's hard.
Oh,
it's really hard.
don't know how you can stay bent over like that all day. I have a very weak back. I would be crippled by the end of one day of your job.
Lots of yoga, lots of stretching, lots of everything's this. So and it's, this is everything I've learned about horses' bodies. Like, it's so cool that I chat with my physio a lot about how the correlations, but everything's this. So anything like crouched over in front for the podcast listeners, sorry. So everything I do stretch wise is like shoulders back, arms back, opening up my chest, really. That feels so good just doing that right now. Like, anyway.
Yeah. So we are going to add a little bonus to this podcast, which you can find on YouTube, and we'll also upload it to our website at www.equestrianmovement.com/The Glorious Hoof. And you're going to do just a little mini training for us on some postural defects.
Some postural stuff. I'll concentrate on just postural stuff. Horses with toe in, toe out, or limb deformities of some description, and then I might just go through a little bit of what is normal posture, because not a lot of horses stand normally. And once you start really looking, like, it looks odd initially when a horse is standing with all four legs with the cannon bones perpendicular to the ground and resting, and not resting a hind leg, just standing square, and their muscles are nice and loose and just like that is normal. And once you start noticing that your horses aren't standing that way, it can really kind of open your eyes a bit and make you start thinking, which is awesome. Thinking owners are just, I love working with a thinking owner.
Yeah, awesome. Definitely. That's definitely one of the things that we teach as well, is like, how does your horse stand when it's in the paddock? How is your horse standing when you bring it in to tack it up? Like, that is an indication of how you're working them for crookedness as well, or straightness. It's not, how well can you cue a square halt? It's how square is the training and the management and the work that you're doing with your horse. Like, how much is it squaring and balancing them out? And that is to do with overall soundness. Like, a crooked, imbalanced horse progresses to lameness and arthritis. So we're just trying to like manage these external forces that we are responsible for when we're putting on the horse to create the longevity of their career, so that they don't break down at a young age and have to be retired.
And I love that. Even, I don't know if you're familiar with Sharon May Davis's work. She talks about the elbow. Every horse that she dissects that is a ridden animal, like a ridden horse, has got elbow arthritis, even if they've just been lightly broken in some form. And like, all of our bodies have got wear and tear. So whenever I'm working my horse, I even just think just the act of sitting on her can be doing damage. So what can I manage? That's wonderful. That's what you're teaching
Yeah.
Exactly. It's the first do no harm thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
We want to ride our horses. We
Yeah.
do, because we love it. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of the horses do enjoy
Mm.
the connection and the
Yeah.
and moving their bodies and feeling
Yeah.
good that way. But how can we do that in a least, like in a what am I trying to say here? You know, without we're doing the smallest amount of damage possible.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
mentally and physically.
Yeah, it's a big job, a big project.
Definitely.
And even us with, like, you know, 20 years up our sleeve of don't tell anyone how old I am. Up our sleeve of, like, working on this kind of thing. It's a constant you know, trying to improve your understanding and how you work with them, and it's always for the benefit of the horse and not for the ribbons.
Yep, definitely. And there's no end point.
No, it really isn't. It's just a ongoing obsession.
Yeah.
Which is why Who's your obsession and movement is mine.
Yep. It's awesome. Okay.
Beautiful. So if people want to check out these awesome pictures of the posture that you've been correcting and everything else that you love to do hoof-wise, they can check you out on facebook.com/Glorious Hoof.
Yeah.
And on Instagram, you're at the Glorious Hoof AU.
That's right.
And then we'll have our bonus training on our website. And you're also in our free Facebook group, the Stronger Bond Community, where if we have hoof issues in like people talking about hoof problems in there, we generally tend to tag you.
Yeah, tag me.
Yeah, jump in and
always happy to give some. I love that.
We should probably try and tee up a way, because we offer a gait analysis as one of our ways to help you see if your horse is tracking up soundly. I think that would be pretty cool if we could do that slow motion video as well with you with the hoof.
Yeah, happy to do we could do something live, we could do something recorded. Happy to have a look at some movement and just make comments on the way the horse is moving and what I would see in the feet and how I would handle that as a farrier. That's awesome.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see, like, how much of what I'm seeing in a gait analysis is hoof. Because obviously that isn't my forte.
I think if you've got a good eye for movement otherwise, I think once you know what's normal in the way the distal limb moves, if you've got a good eye, you'll pick that up.
Yeah. I have an eye for what's wrong.
Yeah.
If there's something wrong about it, I'm like, there's something wrong with that, but I don't know what's wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
So lovely chatting with you. I could
you too
all day about hooves, and I think we'll have to jump back in again at some stage and talk about some of your other passions.
Definitely
the polyurethane shoes. That's
it's exciting.
We will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye.